A disease, a plague, we all love to hate, have to play the game, have to make a name, all our insecurities are on this display. This is war with the enemy, think that it was meant to be, living in a time where disease is on every screen. I won't let them fester me, I know most are festering. Negativity is a plague for the mentally weak. No mercy, all I got is working, never stop searching, never quench the thirst.
Good afternoon and welcome to yet another episode of Atheist Women Unload. Today I am your host, Cynthia McDonald, and I am so happy to be here. Along with me is my co-host, Jena Miyu. How you doing, Jena?
I am doing quite well, Miss Lady. How about yourself?
Oh, not too shabby, not too shabby. I am here, and even though I'm excited to have this conversation, even though that I know that it's a very heavy conversation, but it needs to be had.
Indeed, I feel the same.
Yes, and I'm really glad that you're here to throw and not throw the microphone, but share the microphone.
We're gonna share it.
Right, we're gonna share it. Yes, okay. Exactly. We have other people that are sharing with us as well. Do we want to go ahead and bring them on?
Yeah, let's do so.
Okay, let's do it. Okay.
I hear we have Cindy Plaza with us, of course.
Yes, we do, all the way from across the pond.
Hi.
Down. No, this will say pond. Hey, Cindy, how you doing?
Hi, doing okay. How about you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Also, another host of Atheist Women Unload to have the conversation. I believe that we have a fellow, not necessarily a woman that unloads, but they do unload, and they are an atheist. Last time I checked, Mateo, how you doing?
Hello, I'm fine, thank you. Thanks for inviting me. And yes, I'm not a woman, sadly, but who knows? Maybe future only will tell.
Yeah, we'll see.
Nice to see you.
Whatever floats your boat. Also, we have Aicila.
We're gonna get it.
Yes, she was very Aicila. How you doing?
Good. It's nice to be here.
Thank you for actually being here. I appreciate you coming. And not last but definitely not least, another panelist, Demi. How are you?
Hello, sorry, I had myself muted.
It's okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Also not a woman, non-binary, trans person. You know how it goes.
Yeah, listen, we just here. We are people. How about that? Mm-hmm. We are human beings, and we are all here because we care about what's happening right now, and it's really important for us to really discuss our thoughts and the sentiments of a lot of people that's here in the United States and also around the world. That's why I'm really glad that Mateo and Cindy are here, because they can definitely speak to how the United States is looking right now with the rise in gun violence and mass shootings and the like. And also shout out to everybody that's in the audience right now. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We see you guys all in the chat. Thank you so much for actually joining us. And I said that twice, but that's okay, but I really mean it. How about that? And please, everyone, make sure that you guys are commenting, and also please like and subscribe to this channel, and also share this video, and please participate in the chat, because even though that we are on the screen, this is a large discussion with multiple people who happen to be with us today. So I'm pretty sure you guys saw the thumbnail. I'm pretty sure that you guys are fairly aware of what we're discussing today. And we're talking about gun control and gun violence, specifically in the United States, because it seems like that we have been in the news a lot lately when it comes to gun violence. I mean, gun violence in the United States is not new. It takes on many shapes and forms. But one of the things that is quite prevalent that is not necessarily an issue in other developed countries is mass shootings, in not only in schools, but also in the general environment. We start to have, I believe that the last source that I saw said that we had, and I believe this was an NPR article that I saw recently that said that to date, we are over 246 mass shootings this year alone. And we're about 23 weeks into 2022. So I'm going to go ahead and just open it up to everyone and just really just like give your thoughts in about the climate that we're in right now. I know that Cindy and Teo, we are going to have another discussion tomorrow about this, and so I guess I definitely want to get your perspectives as well. But let's just go ahead and go around the room, starting from Jena to Cindy to Demi. I see Lee. I'm so sorry. Aicila. And
Aicila, if you want to make up a pet name for me, I will accept it.
I pride myself in knowing how to pronounce people's names. I make the point to do that, and I'm struggling right now, and I'm really upset with myself. So,
I'm sorry. Don't I want you to know it's all good by me, and I appreciate your thoughtfulness.
And I'm gonna get your name right before this whole stream is all said and done. Trust and believe, okay? In the back of my mind, I'm going to be practicing, okay, while I'm quiet. So I'm going to be quiet right now.
We are believing in you. We all believe in you, Cynthia.
Let us pray.
You'll manage.
We know you. We believe in you. You can do it.
I can do it.
So definitely, let me start off by saying this: the rate alone that you mentioned is a sobering thought, truly sobering, because it's almost. We constantly here in America, we constantly hear the news of, these mass shootings and murders that are happening. And yet not everything is caught. Never everything is caught on national news, nor do everyone read the newspaper. So it's almost like, wow, there's really been that much, and we're only in June. It's hard to fathom, even, and it wasn't any different this time last year, and the year before that, and the year before that. So it's sad, but it is just downright sad and awful. And the more this conversation is had, unfortunately, the more that less is done. It's good to have these talks. It's good to have people express themselves and express the headache and the frustration. I can only imagine what our friends Cindy and Mateo must think of us here in America and be like, why can't they get their ish together? But at the same time, this is unfortunately the American culture that has, developed as long as America has been around. But more on that later.
Indeed. Demi and Aicila, are you both are also in the United States too, correct?
Yes, I'm from the Chicagoland area.
Oh, okay, so you're in my neck. You're in
Yeah.
Denver. Okay. So Demi is actually in my neck of the woods. Hey, how you doing? and that's your name for now. Going on. It's actually right here in Denver as well. So I kind of want you guys to chime in first and to kind of just give your thoughts about, how are you feeling? What are some of the things that are running through your mind when you are hearing about more mass shootings at the hand of a military style weapon and the like. So I want you two to chime in first, and then I want to get the perspectives of Cindy and Teo.
Do you want to start, Demi?
My perspective is a bit complicated because when you talk about gun control, past efforts at gun control have generally fallen disproportionately on marginalized people. The Black Panthers have a lot to say about how gun control gets applied unequally.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about effective gun control, you have to be careful that whatever measures you are proposing aren't going to fall unduly on poor and otherwise marginalized people, women, queer people, non-white people in the United States, who as a general rule, cannot rely on giving the police a monopoly on violence.
Sure.
So my perspective is complicated, and I also want to show up to be somebody who has a good idea of how gun control laws have driven firearms engineering in a wide variety of wild ways, because it's very, very difficult to legislate. That's most of my perspective. Obviously, I don't think 260 mass shootings in 6 months is appropriate or reasonable or a good thing. But I also don't expect us to make much headway from a purely gun control standpoint. I think there are things we can do, but I think also these shootings are symptomatic of larger societal issues in the United States that cannot be addressed through gun control.
Hell yeah. Yeah.
I want to put a pin in what you said, Demi, about difficult to legislate. I want to come back to that because I think that there's a broader conversation that I think that all of us can really participate in, especially in that particular area. But Aicila.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Yes.
And actually, what Demi was talking about is also something that I reflect on. We did a show. I have a podcast on gun control or gun issues, I should say, a few years ago. And through my research on that, what I got to is I think we need to reframe the conversation because right now we're in this false dichotomy of like gun rights versus saving lives. Mm-hmm. And what we really need to do, I think personally, is move it to saying I'm not pro or anti-gun rights. What I am is anti-slaughter. And I'd like to determine what we do to get to that because I don't, yes, there's something. When I did my research, I pulled up my old notes. There were like 400 million guns in our country. And yet like 40% of murders and suicides are actually committed with handguns. Nobody ever talks about getting rid of handguns for many, many reasons. And, the conversations that I get in with people online or in person, often if we talk about the banning of assault rifles, they're like, oh, there's so many. And to be fair, I technically agree with them. Like if having an assault rifle meant you were going to kill people in this way, we'd have many, many more of them because there's predicted like 110 million of those guns in our country. However, I do think all of the other countries that, immediately were like, okay, we're banning them. What they did was they demonstrated a political will. They said, we actually are drawing a line right now. And that is what we lack here in our country. We haven't said we're going to draw a line. And there are so many times we're like, this has to be it, right? Like this has to be the moment we're going to draw the line. And then we don't. And so my and there's capitalism and colonialism and all these other things at play that are such large systemic issues, right? Like no one person is going to solve it. But I feel like we need to reframe the conversation into something that we can potentially get some sort of political will around to draw that line. Personally, I think even just starting with something as simple as including things like emotional self-regulation and resilience in our school curriculum. Because maybe if more people were raised with some sense of how to do that, fewer of them would want to shoot people when they're mad. I mean, I know that sounds ridiculous, but I just don't know what else we can do.
No, I feel you on that. Yeah.
There's a lot of things we can do because when you look at mass shooters, generally speaking, you are talking about a suicidal person, first off. And second off, most of the time you're talking about somebody who has displayed past behavioral problems. Something like 54% of America's mass shooters are domestic violence
exactly.
perpetrators. So there are things we can do.
Right.
But also political will to do so. The Republican Party is going to continue to forestall as many of these attempts as they can. Domestic violence, I agree with Bo of the Fifth Column that it's a good one to push on because that's an easier sell politically to put the Republicans in the position of them saying that we need to let domestic violence offenders have guns is a much less tenable position for them to defend than we're going to take away assault weapons, which you can't define meaningfully, but we can talk about that later.
May I interrupt a little bit, guys?
Go for it. I think we're going to transition to...
Yeah.
Demi, it's not Alice. Aicila, I'm sorry, guys. I see you talking this, and I can only think of this meme that says, there is no way how to stop this, says only country where this happens. And I'm really sorry, but there are many ways to stop this. And maybe your politicians should look at other countries around. And I guess that's why Cynthia and I are here. So I just wanted to say that. I'm really
I
sorry
know,
about
and
the amendment.
Don't have
Mateo,
a Second Amendment, though, and
right?
you can't throw that out without literally scrapping the Bill of Rights or the Constitution. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a terrible
Well,
thing, but I don't think it's going to
fair.
happen anytime soon.
Can I chime in real quick about the Second Amendment? So I've been trying to find out exactly who this particular SCOTUS was, but there was a SCOTUS that was appointed on by Richard Nixon. I want to say in the early 1970s. He was what the quintessential thing of what you call a conservative white man. You know, he just looked and talked the part. He was that. If you actually saw conservative white man in the dictionary, his picture would be behind it. Now, he was actually interviewed in 1991, and like the whole conversation about Americans owning guns came up. I don't know exactly how that came about, but that did come up in the conversation. And one of the things that he said, and I kind of agree with him, and that's kind of weird for me to actually agree with a conservative, but he said that when I think about the Second Amendment, that's one of the amendments that I can see and wish would go away. And the reason why he said that it should go away is because the way that it's being used now is to give an excuse for people to be able to purchase guns. And I don't necessarily have an issue with a gun owner. But the problem is that when you're looking at the Second Amendment in of itself, it was designed in the 1780s in order for people to be able to form militias so that they can defend their properties at that particular time, the newly formed United States of America. Now, the United States of America now has a very robust military, last time I checked. Okay, they have a Navy, they have an Army, they have the Marines, they have an Air Force, and they are themselves are quite trained and capable. And we also have a National Guard, also, last time I checked. So if any type of foreign enemy would like to come to the United States and get all big and bold with themselves, we do have proper trained people that are able to put them down. Matter of fact, I was even remarking on one video that did a scenario if all the actual developed countries decide to just come into the United States and just try to take over. Our military is so vast and so big and so well equipped that no, they will not win. So it's kind of interesting to me and a bit baffling that a lot of people would like to really hold on to this whole thing, like, you know, my rights because of the Second Amendment, when we really think about the Second Amendment in the historical element of it, it's not in the case of what we look at as today. I'm gonna leave that and reopen it up.
What I was gonna say, like, people leave that well-regulated militia piece out, and it's problematic. And then Teo, I wanted to be really clear. Ideally, I totally agree with you. I'm just in a pragmatic place of myself and so many people have protested, and for whatever reason, we as a country are sick enough to be okay with the slaughter of children and innocent people shopping over saying, maybe I just won't have this gun in my house. I mean, it's very messed up, but that's what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
Right. Go ahead, Cindy.
So, to the point Cynthia was making, the guy you mentioned, he used the word fraud. He said that the way the Second Amendment is used today to justify keeping arms was the biggest fraud of the last 20 years or something, he said. So yes, that's one big issue. Another one is, and to answer Theo, there are what is legally and technically possible, and then there's what is pragmatically possible. and the two are not necessarily the same, because something is legally possible, but considering the context of the politics, of the culture, of the habits, of the customs and everything, it may not be feasible right now. So you have to take steps, very baby steps, to go to where you want to go. In France, for example, we have all weapons, and that's taken in the very large context, are separated in categories. And so I think it's the first three categories you can have whenever you want. Then the fourth, you can possess one but not go around with it in the street. The fifth one, you can only possess one if you have a permit. So depending on the need and the power of the weapon, then it fits in a certain category. Like, for example, sorry, I forgot the word. Hunting rifles, which are not extremely powerful, they are in a category that allows you to own them with just a basic hunting permit, which costs, I think it's 20 euros or something like that. So it is possible to implement those things, but again, as you said, there are a lot of issues in the US, and I made a video about this on my channel yesterday. It took me an hour to go over most of the big issues the US face, and there's corruption, which is one of the reasons why new laws cannot be passed, because of the NRA and the money in the politics and etc. And there's also a more a deeper issue, I would say, is that in most European countries we have a viable police force. So we don't feel the need to own guns, because we know that most of the time police will do their job. While in the US, police kills more people than in any other country in the world.
Sorry. Can I interrupt? Because, like, Philip Grant just said in the chat, certificates of character from law enforcement. I'm like, no, we do not trust the law enforcement to make the decision of who is allowed to. No, absolutely not. Carry on.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying.
I think that was her point, Demi. Like, there's a very big difference between, like, and I'm sorry, Cindy, but I was just wanted to preface, like, there's a very big difference on how our cultures in the United States, as far as like how we as residents, as U.S. citizens, and things of that nature actually relate to our police force versus other countries. It's very different, and I think that. And one of the things that has even been like documented in history is how adverse police are to citizens who happen to even stand up for their rights to protest. I mean, like, look at the civil rights movement. Look at, look at the Civil War. So I think that's something that that has to be looked at, especially like when you are thinking about culture. Oh, and let's talk about this. And Cindy and Teo, I want you all to start off first. Let's talk about culture and as far as like how folk in their countries utilize culture and firearms as they are to their day-to-day lives versus like the United States. So Cindy, I think that you were in that area when you were talking about how France and other European countries, how they relate to their police versus how we relate to ours. So please continue.
Yeah, so basically my point was that you will never be able to get rid of all the guns in the US until you have solved the police training issues. And not just police training, but also police accountability. And there's also this mentality. Demi, you mentioned Bow of the Fifth Column earlier. I watch his video a lot, and he mentioned this recently he mentioned this: the gun makes the man mentality that is strong in the U.S. It means that as the simple fact of possessing a gun makes you more manly, makes you more powerful, makes you for example, you see that when every time there's a shooting, they say you need to arm the teachers because you just need to give them a gun and that will make them men and strong men and protectors.
Yeah.
And this need to be tackled at every level. I mean, at the politician level, at the cultural level, like in movies. This is a very systemic and deep mentality that needs to go away because you cannot solve the gun issue in the US if you don't solve this.
Teo, go ahead and chime in.
Oh, yeah. Cindy has said a lot of things in here, and she's totally right when she says that a big part of the problem is this gun-loving culture that they have. Somebody in the chat said that gun culture gets back into identity. And is that true, guys? Just go Google guns, and you're going to find endless amount of images with guns, God, and a lot of whatever. Well, lately it's just gun, guts, and Trump, but we will talk about that later. And I was saying recently that a big problem is that Americans see guns as toys for adults. They see them as toys. You can collect them, you can disarm them, you can play with them, you can decorate them. And I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to do this. Giving some context for people watching, I'm from one of those countries that Trump and people from Fox News calls either shithole countries or Mexican countries. You know, hablamos español and all of that. And down here, there is crime. There are gangs that deal with drugs and stuff like that. We do have some violence. We do have problems. But do you know what we don't have? People shooting at schools. Go and check it. If that happens, it's going to be a huge piece of news that the whole continent is going to be worried about. Because it usually doesn't happen in here. In most of Hispano-American countries, even despite we that had some dictatorships in power some time ago, before the COVID thing, we had a lot of protests going in several of our countries, and we didn't have problems with people shooting at protesters. Oh, there was an American citizen who came here with a gun and decided to shoot at protesters because he felt threatened. But in here, it usually doesn't happen because in order to get a gun, you have to be checked. They have to know that you are going to be responsible. There are special courses for people with those. And there was a while in some places where people could just get guns, and they decided that the best thing to do, instead of trying to take the guns away, was to make them legal and to teach people how to use their guns and how to be responsible. Mm-hmm. And you know what? We don't have news like you have that, a baby of 2 years old shot his father because he was playing with a gun. That doesn't happen in here.
Right.
Because
so, unfortunately... Oh, no. I'm sorry.
Only responsible people can have guns. Now it's yours, Jena.
Yeah. No, unfortunately, because the United States uniquely not only has federal government, but they have state government, meaning states have their own laws or create their own laws surrounding anything and all things, just name it. And with the conversation of guns, every law has their own regulated, way of handling, the whole, what do you call it? When you walk, I don't know the name of the law because I live in California because we don't have this law, but the whole walking around openly with the gun, open carry.
Oh, open carry, yeah.
It's in the freaking name. Sorry.
So either states have open carry laws or they have conceal and carry laws. I believe that Illinois and Chicago are like with the conceal and carry. But yeah, go ahead.
Right. So, unfortunately, you have those type of things, and every state varies, where we don't have a wholehearted regulation from the federal government to say we're abiding by this, and people should be trained and certified and made sure, and a waiting period and all that good stuff, or an age limit at best too. So, and easily as a 17 to 18-year-old person can arm themselves, but yet they can't buy a drink until they're 21 legally. So that's just the imbalance that we have, unfortunately. And also, in addition, like how we've already been discussing, the culture aspect of it makes it even more aggressively difficult to strive to, if one person were to, I'm not a person to say this, to completely eliminate guns. I think that would be, I mean, if we recall Prohibition, the folks that knows your American history, when we tried that didn't go both so well for us for a time. So obviously just completely removing a thing does not solve the problem. We have to make those appropriate and strive to, if we can, damper down the money that's funneled by these corporations that push for having more freer gun non-regulations. Unfortunately, that's even more difficult because so much of our government and policy making and everything else is just fueled by big money.
Yeah.
Also,
On this point,
I'll respond to Philip. Yes, gun culture is inextricably part of the conservative right in America, and that's part of the problem that we've had is we have a neoliberal Democrat, wing of politics in the United States that would like to just take all of the guns, and that's not going to happen. We have 400 million of them. It's not a practical thing to attempt. And, simultaneously, we can't get background, checks actually enforced. There are background checks on firearms, but there are loopholes where if they fail to find evidence of wrongdoing, then they're allowed to just, give it to you, and it's not an effective system.
How you see that?
yeah, I'm sorry. I just wanted to address Deborah Grace's comment. She says, "Do we trust the state to have guns if we don't trust the state? They take rights from women." And I think that goes into what Cynthia was and Jena were saying just a minute before. I think the federalism in the US is one of the big issues you have to solve as well.
Yeah. I want to get into that as well a little bit later, but Aicila, I want you to chime in.
Thanks. So to piggyback a little bit on what Jena and Cindy and Demi were talking about, one, yes, we do have laws around background checks, but one of the things to understand about how our country works is Congress will pass a law or a state, and then they also have to pass a budget that funds it. And if they don't pass a budget that funds it, it doesn't get enforced. And that's that can be very catch as catch can. It depends, once again, on that whole political will piece. And then the other piece that I think is helpful to understand is a lot of these conversations will end up getting sort of stopped by, well, we need to see, some evidence or research. Like, we want to make evidence-based backed decisions. And there was a freeze in place for the CDC. They weren't allowed to study gun violence from 1993 until very recently. And so it was very difficult to have, different people, of course, would track statistics, but it's not the same as the CDC actually doing the work to comprehend the impact and what causes it. And so with that freeze in place, those conversations would get derailed with the red herring of like, blah, 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 we don't even know. And so I think those are things that it's important to include, because when we talk about like this, the needs and the political will, we also have to comprehend that some of the ways in which we have been prevented are very sneaky. Like, I didn't know there was a freeze until I looked into it. So I was like, of course there's, oh, what is that?
Yeah.
And so I feel like that, we also have to find, that's why I'm like, we have to reframe this conversation to something that we can get people on board with. Mm-hmm. And honestly, at this point, I feel like we, to a certain extent, at least in this country, I feel like we've got so much like instinctive reaction at this point. It's very difficult to get through that knee-jerk response to an actual conversation, even in yourself, let alone with somebody else. And so we have to find ways to invite people into the conversation differently, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear you, especially when you're talking about how do we get people on board, right? Like, how do we get people to the point where we can kind of like go past this particular narrative that's being a lot of times espoused by gun owners, even like Christian nationalists. I mean, like I think of like the whole. I forgot the person's name. I think her name was Candace Taylor. I don't know if you guys heard of this person. She was running for Congress in Georgia, and her little slogan was God, guns, no, Jesus, guns, and babies. That is what she was running on.
How fitting.
I know, right? Which is crazy to me when you think about this whole conversation. And I hate that, I had, something to do when we first talked about like abortion rights and reproductive rights a few weeks ago, and how people are so much so touting like this pro-life narrative, yet they are also very much so pro-gun. And guns are only designed to either injure or kill. That's it. There's no, and I understand like people will say, well, I need to use it in order to defend myself. And all this other stuff. Or I hunt or whatever. And that's fine. But do you really need to do it with the AR-15? That's all I'm saying. But I want to talk about now states' rights versus federalism, because this is kind of the issue that really hems us up from being able to pass proper gun control, in my opinion. So if anybody knows a little bit about United States history, that's my thing. Jena, you're aware. But one of the things that we dealt with in the United States when it first was formed is that we were under the Articles of Confederation before we actually adopted the U.S. Constitution in 1789. Now, the Articles of Confederation actually made the central government, or what we call the federal government, very weak. A lot of the powers and how to govern oneself fell upon the states, to the point where states were operating as mini countries, right? So what ended up happening is that the people, the Congressional Congress was like, oh, that's not going to work. We can't levy taxes. We can't form, we can't even agree on how we're supposed to actually conduct ourselves as a country. No one will take us seriously. We need to revamp our laws in order for us to have a strong central government, right? But there was still autonomy when it came to how states were going to govern themselves in certain forms, with and they had their own constitutions. And this is, and because of that, because in my opinion, I don't necessarily think that the founding fathers were able to really be strong enough in order to be more centralized when it came to the powers of government, even though that, or powers of federal government rather, even though that the states are supposed to be beholden to the federal government when it comes to their particular laws and how they govern their people. But when we think about even gun control in of themselves, we still have an issue with how a state that may be next to your state has a total different way to regulate their gun purchases versus another. I can think of how when we have these conversations specifically, a lot of people just like to say, especially on the right, what about Chicago? Because according to ABC, Chicago has the most mass shootings in all of the cities in the United States, in all of the urban cities in the United States. But when I was looking up what is behind those mass shootings, they're not mass shootings in schools. They're not mass shootings. I think that we had one spree where we had an issue at a hospital. I think that happened like a couple of years ago.
Right.
But as far as like, a lone gun person coming into a school with an AR-15, or even with or something like that, like at a grocery store, that doesn't really happen here. Most of the time, when you're talking about gun violence and mass shootings in Chicago specifically, you're talking about gang violence, and a lot of times those are in marginalized communities, poorer communities, communities that don't necessarily have like a lot of resources, job advancement, etc. Income low, wealth is non-existent, so you have gun violence. And anytime that you actually have like an area like that, crime is always going to be higher. I mean, like there has never been anywhere in the in history where that was not the case. You have poorer people, you have in that particular environment higher crime. It kind of goes together, right? But then the conversation goes to, but Chicago and Illinois have very strong gun laws. Yes, we do. But Indiana and Wisconsin don't. And yes, and the majority, and these are states that are right next to, Chicago. Wisconsin is like an hour away driving. Indiana, from my house, is like 10 minutes. And like as soon as you get over to the border, there's a gun shop right there. Have at it,
Hey, if I can say something here, that's the same thing that happens in Mexico. Mexico has very strong laws regulating guns, but they all come illegally from the USA, and however they are just right next to them, they get a lot of guns in that way, and same thing that over there. Criminals get them in a very easy way and for cheap from people who want to get rid of their guns or want to buy new ones.
Yeah, that's
you can just cross the border into Texas, and it's Candyland for gun selection there.
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, let's really talk about that whole thing about federalism versus states' rights, and when it comes to like how those things are really how laws are done, and as far as like how one are regulating laws and constitutions and things of that nature in the states versus what we do on the federal level. So let's go around the room. I'm going to start with Demi, since you were the last person to talk.
Since I interrupted. Sorry. Well, I mean, so Chicago has very strict gun laws. Illinois doesn't generally. It's just Chicago and Cook County and a few other particularly wealthy communities that have stricter gun laws. So, I feel like federalism is a bigger issue than fits in a conversation about gun control. Like, you're talking about critical weaknesses in the structure of the United States. Yes, it's weird that states have individual laws, but it's also weird that we have a nation this large with groups of people this disparate, this far away. The cultural differences within the United States are not trivial between Pennsylvania and Oregon, right? We are talking about a landmass significantly larger than traditionally defined Western Europe.
Sure.
So, yes, it would be very helpful if we had some form of improving federal gun control. But I don't know if I should drag the topic back to actual gun control. Like, do we talk about raising the age? Cindy brought up a very good point earlier that I kind of wanted to respond to, talking about how other countries actually classify different firearms into different categories based on how dangerous they are. One of the problems with what Cindy said was low-powered hunting rifles. Generally speaking, hunting rifles are the highest-powered firearms. I mean, if you need to take down anything more dangerous than a deer, then you need something that will do very bad things to a human being.
But they don't go with a 10 or 20 rounds clip.
Yeah, but you can fix that for yourself in your backyard with sheet metal and a hammer. It's a magazine. So that's not a good way to attack gun control. I do feel like in the United States we could be saying, we're talking about raising the age limit from 18 to 21. We could be saying, and at 21 you only get non-auto loading firearms, which it would be a fairly easy distinction to make, and would prevent your 22-year-old shooter from acquiring an AR-15. I feel like the unfortunate part of what we're struggling against is the military-industrial complex itself. And it's bigger than the United States. The U.S. military's new service rifle contract is from Sig Sauer, a German company. And those companies are going to keep innovating. And if we were, for example, to start saying nobody under 25 is allowed automatic firearms, I'm willing to bet within 2 years we would have new pump action rifles firing 6.5 Creedmoor with 30-round detachable box magazines. And we'd kind of be back to square one almost. It still would be a slight imposition on your hypothetical mass shooter, but
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that, because like that's a conversation that happens a lot when we are talking about gun control, which is the magazines, right? I think of specifically with the AR-15, which happens to be the weapon of choice to just gun down people for willy-nilly because, hey, why not? These particular guns and their magazines can, oftentimes shoot between 200 to 300 rounds per minute, right? So, matter of fact, one of the reasons why the police did not want to go into the school in Uvalde is because they were afraid that they were going to be shot, because it would be so easy for the gun person that was there at that time, just to unload and just pretty much mow down the unit that was there, because that's what they did to the kids, right? So, if we really want to talk about like, okay, what makes sense in this particular area, to really try to quell these things, like does bump stocks and magazines and how those are regulated, does that make sense, and why not?
I mean, that could be a portion of it, right? That could be one aspect of it. I don't think that solves the whole issue. It could be one aspect.
It could be one aspect.
I want to disagree with Demi.
Magazine capacity is particularly difficult to actually functionally regulate. To stop a determined person who is, let's be honest, trying to commit a murder-suicide. 3D printing can solve this problem for people. Very basic craftsmanship skills can solve this problem for people. And then you have prevented every legal gun owner in the state from carrying a comparable capacity magazine.
But Demi, I'm wondering, and this is something that I want to bring up, and Mateo, I'll bring you in a moment, because like I think about like other industrialized countries, developed countries that actually have like put either kibosh on semi-automatic weapons, or even like limited the purchase or what have you, or even regulated like bump stocks and magazines, and they don't have this problem. So how is it that if we really had like a proper conversation about, do we limit these things, like that, how that would say, oh, well, that won't solve the problem?
Well, Aaron's also right. 3D printing is not necessarily the solution. The solution is drive to another state that will sell you, mass manufactured magazines.
Mm-hmm.
So we're back to our state versus federalism issue. The U.S. is different from those other countries in a number of ways, and one of them is that we already have 400 million guns, and another is that we support a very, very large gun industry that continues to wag the tail of the dog on U.S. politics. So both of those are complicated issues to address.
Well, Teo, I wanted you to...
That's the problem.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have to jump in here because as soon as Demi sees a lot of problems, but I feel, and I may be wrong, so feel free to correct me, but when you fix one problem and people find a way to go through a loop, you go for the loop, and now you have solved two problems, and they go for another loop, and then you go for that loop, and you keep going until you have solved the whole problem. But you have to start somewhere. Even if later you're going to go back to step one, you're going to solve that other problem, and now you're not in step one again. And stopping, the laws from doing that, because that is going to be something else going to happen. People are going to do stuff. Down here, we do have people who create guns in their garage, and those guns are illegal. And if they are found with them, they go to jail because they are creating something illegal that is not allowed. So you are, yes, the problem exists. People will try to go around the issue, but you're starting to control things. And now not every single 18 years old child will, well, not child, it's an adult, will be able to get a gun, only specific ones. And those specific ones are going to be in trouble. And, you are starting to cover all the problems. And you're not going to solve the problem at once.
When you talk about closing a loophole, and we'll just legislate it again, the problem there is that you are suggesting that, let's say, American Congress can keep up with the rate of innovation by the military-industrial complex.
Why not?
Even if they can't,
why not? Because passing laws is a much slower process than finding new engineering solutions.
Well, I agree that, like, yes, in the United States, like, passing like legislation that everybody can get on board with is a slow and arduous process.
It's an enormous problem. If we
Yeah,
do it, we need to do it right.
I mean, right. It's, and like, of course, like, well, first off, here's an issue that we deal with specifically in the United States, that it's how our federal government is structured. Even though, like, the federal government is structured in the way that, it's supposed to provide checks and balances in order for one branch of government not to have overarching power over the other one, right? So, we have our Supreme Court, we have our, bicameral Congress, and then we also have our, our executive branch, which is the president and his administration and his cabinet. Or, well, and I say his because we hadn't had a woman president yet, so there you go, right? Sorry, Hillary. Anyway, so we have that issue, and we have, like, and unfortunately, even in Congress right now, we have a lot, and we even talked about this going back to Philip Grant's question about, this whole notion about, like, guns being very much so part of the Christian nationalist rhetoric, ideology, whatever you want to call it, that a lot of those type of people are now in Congress. And since they're now in Congress, you got your Marjorie Taylor Greens, you got your Lauren Boeberts and the like, and even, like, and then you have, like, some that have general sentiment or sympathy or empathy for those ideas in the Senate as well. So it's going to, the big problem I see, especially when we're talking about, legislation on the federal level versus what's on the state level, is because these we have very and I think I forgot, I think that one of you all brought up this whole disparate, I think it was you, Demi, this whole disparate idea about how we proceed, or even, like, how we are supposed to perceive these particular things concerning guns in of itself as part of American culture. So, you have, like, some that's on this saying, like, no, we really need to do something about this. People are unnecessarily dying, just, and because we refuse to take action that all of us can really, like, push forward with, because to me it's a no-brainer, versus, but what about my God-given rights? Matter of fact, I even read there was a congressman who said that it was God himself came down from heaven and gave the right for Americans to own guns. It was God said that it was our right. And this is an idea that's, like, floating around. These are your
Ingrained in
elected
our
officials,
identity.
people. Yeah, these are your elected officials, people. So I'm going to leave it at that. Let's go ahead and just discuss that, like, when we're talking about, like, what makes sense versus what we have available as far as, like, representation.
Right. Aicila, let's go with you, because I know you are pressed for time. So let's allow you to have a point in this.
Well, one, coming from a conservative background, I will, there was someone who said, I do believe maybe God does love us the way he loves his son, since he allowed him to be brutally tortured and murdered. So I kind of was like, ouch. And maybe, like, let's think about that. So that's a probably inappropriate dig, but there you go. And then
I'm for it. Go ahead.
Other quick moments. I mean, we have thoughts about, so you talked about states' rights and federalism. And I actually agree with the states having some control, because, like, a very built up city maybe doesn't need the same place. Like, Colorado has a lot of ranchers, and they have a lot of reasons that they want to be able to do. I'm not saying they need AK-47s, but I do think there's some sense to that, like, letting localities and municipalities assert what their needs are in terms of actual functionality, if you think of a gun as a tool rather than a toy. And I think a gun that's a tool needs to be regulated differently than a gun that's a toy, kind of the way we do cars, right? Like, if your cars, and maybe you have a semi-truck and that's your job, and you get a different class of license for that, and then you can have, like, 14 little, like, 1920s Fords but they're not legal, but they're kind of legal, right? Like, there's rules. Mm-hmm. So I think that, like, classification that you were talking about, Cindy, has some application here. And we have some structures, right? Like, we have the licensing for cars, and then there's countries like Germany has the gun clubs. Other countries have come up with different systems where people can keep even some of the, like, maybe we could, like, you can have an AK-47 as long as you keep it at the gun club. You just can't have it at your house. Like, there's a lot of options, and most responsible gun owners, I think, would be open to it. And then the other thing is, like, think about like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, the incidence of drunk driving and deaths was high. And what did we do? We made bartenders liable for serving people drinks, and we made the penalties for the problem big. And they just, it's not this, yes, people still die, but it's not at the same rate that it used to be. Right. And there's this huge resistance to making gun shop owners and people who are selling them liable. And I absolutely disagree with that. I think if you are providing a gun or bullets, honestly, I think both places, because the ammunition is another place where we could restrict access that doesn't get as much attention. Where both of those places, if we held people liable for selling them in our capitalistic society, and then we also held people liable if they got a hold of your gun and you didn't report it missing, right? Like, because some of my friends are gun owners and like, well, what if somebody took it and I didn't know? And I'm like, one, if you have a gun, you should know where it is. If you can't keep track of your gun, I don't think you should have one. But two, if your gun is missing, I think you need to report it, period, simple. And if you do not report it and it is used to harm someone, then you are held liable. And I think if we just held more people liable for providing the ammunition and the instrument and the access, that much like DUIs, I don't know that we would end them. Oh gosh, it would be great. But I think we would severely limit the number of shootings that occurred if people were terrified. Like if you come in to buy a gun and I'm like, yeah, you're kind of sketchy. And I know that if I sell you that gun, I'm liable if you do something. I might be like, I think I don't want to sell it today. You're allowed to do that. So those are my catching up with you all thoughts, and really appreciate this conversation and the perspectives that Demi and Cindy and Teo brought. I hope I get to see you guys again, and so nice to meet you, Cynthia.
Yeah.
And as always, Jena, such a pleasure.
Appreciate having you here. No, I think you gave us very valid bullet points and talking points too to discuss further, but hope to bring you back for a separate topic, but appreciate having you here, Aicila, and good to see you.
So good to see you all.
And happy birthday to your partner.
Yes. Aicila, I got it right, I think. Did I get it right?
No, you're perfect.
Yes.
Yes.
Look at you.
By all means, follow Aicila's handles, hookups.
That's right. Hook up with me. I mean,
hook up with her down in the description below. You can follow her, subscribe to her podcast, all that good stuff.
The links of Aicila are all in the description box below. Make sure you guys follow.
And I'm going to follow all you guys too. I love it.
Yes, follow for follow.
Nice.
Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Yeah.
Okay, well, so okay, guys, Aicila may have left, but we haven't. We're still here. We're probably going to be here for another 30. So, again, just want to remind the chat audience and all who happen to be listening in the interwebs to make sure that if you do have questions or if you want to chime in, please at Skeptic Haven, so that when we get into the portions when we are putting up chat comments, and also especially when it comes to questions, that we are able to get to you and put you on the big jumbotron and get you your 15 seconds of fame. How about that?
I have a question. I saw a tweet by Richard Marx. I don't know if he's famous or not, but he said
he's a singer. He's an old singer.
Oh, this one?
Yeah. Was it Richard Marx?
Yeah.
I think he was a singer from the 80s.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's but anyway, he said when bullet holes.
That's one to remember that, by the way. But go ahead.
No, I thought the same thing, but yeah. Anyway, when bullet holes in the face of third graders can't unite us, it's beyond repair. America is broken. America is twisted. America is an embarrassment to humanity. I wanted to ask about the "it's beyond repair" part. Do you think it's the case?
It's a struggle. It is a struggle. Beyond prepared, I don't.
Are you sure you want my answer to that?
Yeah, go ahead. Why not?
Somebody brought up in chat talking about militias like the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, the 3%ers. We have half a dozen groups of heavily armed right-wing fascists here in the United States. And a lot of them are planning on a breakdown of law and order, which they are generally referring to as the boogaloo. Yeah, I don't know. I think a major problem is our political system is so locked, so moribund, that it doesn't function as a democracy anymore. We can't. There is famously a study, I think, out of Harvard, that there's virtually no correlation between public opinion and what laws get passed. And there is an 80% correlation between lobbyist opinions and what laws get passed. What we the people want is not particularly relevant anymore. For that reason, I'm also opposed to gun control, because I believe that the founding fathers, when they said a well-funded militia, I think their intent with that was, quote, "From time to time, the tree of liberty must be watered with the blood of tyrants." Yeah, I'm not sure that there is a peaceful way out of this situation, but.
So do you think that, like, the founding fathers, when they were authoring the Second Amendment, that they were more concerned about, like, if people were in power per se, like in power in government, that, you know, that the people had to come around and shoot their asses? Is that what you're saying?
They had just fought a revolution.
Sure. I mean, well, that was my point previously about, we have to keep in context, like, when a lot of these laws were written. Like, it was a very different time, you know, like
the Bible.
Yeah, just like the Bible. Like, you know, like, a lot of
thing.
times the people like to say that the Bible is a moral code of humanity, even though, like, this is a book that never changes, and I would question its morality in a heartbeat.
Same. It is chock full of misogyny. We deserve better. I'm not strictly hardline atheist. I'm opposed to all of our existing organized religions, because they're all chock full of misogyny. Every one of them. Sure. And we deserve better. We can do better. Same thing.
I didn't mean to wake up that demon. I'm sorry.
well, I've got plenty of demons as a trans person in the United States in 2022, and this is one of them.
Well, and this is also called Atheist Women Unload and Friends. So, I you know, when this whole conversation goes to, do you think that we are too far gone to actually get it right? And I think that saying I don't know is intellectually a proper answer, but I don't want to leave it at that. I mean, like, I don't know, like, I think of myself as a pragmatist and a realist, but in some cases I do have some type of optimism, because I know just and I get that way just from looking at how we formed as a nation, and how there have been movements in the past that, when the American electorate said enough is enough, then they organized around a particular issue in order to pass, you know, legislation in order for us to get to a better place. Not perfect, but a better place. Dr. King said, and I'm paraphrasing, that you cannot legislate morality, but you can regulate behavior. And on that note, I want to go to you, Cindy, because you discussed in the past, we had these conversations in the past about, you know, how do we address behavior? So I kind of want you to go in that particular route, please, and thank you.
How do we address behavior?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm currently writing something about how to teach rational thinking, which is not critical thinking. It's a bit different. Rational thinking is, in my view, it's the will or the purpose to think within the bounds of reason in order to be in seeking for the truth most of the time possible. So for that, we need three separate things to be taught. We need, and you spoke about it earlier, we need to learn how our emotions impact our judgment, impact our way of thinking, impact our actions. and we need to learn how to control them when it's necessary. And also, for example, how language is used to control emotions. The second pillar, I would say, is knowledge. You cannot think that once you got out of school, then you have nothing much to learn. I learned more in the last 10 years than I learned in the previous 30 years because I wanted to, because you can't build a good reasoning if you don't have basic knowledge in the first place. It's like building a house. If the first stones you put on the ground, if they're shaky, then the entire house is going to crumble. And the third pillar is critical thinking, and so we all know pretty much what it is. You have skepticism, intellectual honesty, logic, science, and all this. And all those three pillars can be taught very early in schools, not necessarily in a very complicated way. Like intellectual honesty, for example, it can be taught even in kindergarten. And so you can aim at teaching those three things through the entire curriculum and gradually teach things. And that's how you change behavior. Because our behavior depends on what we think and what we believe, and what we believe depends on the way we think. And the way we think is basically how much critical thinking we are able to bring. So that's my solution.
You know, I know this is a little off topic, but I gotta say it. I was in a discourse, I want to say like 2 days ago, with a person, and we were discussing gender issues. Specifically, we were discussing the whole dynamic of women who have multiple sexual partners before marriage possibly having a successful marriage if they did have multiple sexual partners. And the question was asked to me, would I allow my son to have to marry a person that I know had at least 20 partners before they were together?
Only 20?
That question.
How and why would you, as a mother, know that?
I just let's just say that the person, the young lady or whomever, you know, because like of course things are a little bit different nowadays. Let's just say that the person,
a long number to get judgy about. Also,
yeah, I mean, well, this was posed to me. You know, I'm just saying this was the number, right? 20 partners, right? 20 partners. Would you allow your son to marry that person? And I told them that I do not own. Well, first off, I don't have a son. I have a nephew. I'm just raising him because his mother passed away. So I guess technically, sure, by default, but whatever. That's semantics. I said, but I told them, I said, I do not own my child.
Amen.
I am a steward over my child. And the only thing that I can do is teach my child rational and critical thinking so that my child knows how to make proper decisions for themselves. So if they decide that they are with a person who may have had multiple sexual partners before they got together, do they make you happy? Are you in a affirming relationship? Do you guys actually, you know, do you all actually like get one another? Do you all actually have like really good conversations? Do you actually communicate well with one another? Then why would I have a problem with that? And slightly off topic, but going back to where we are here, especially in the United States, that rational and critical thinking are not necessarily something that is part and parcel of the dialogue that's in the United States. We have an interlocker right now who just said that they're a free thinker, and I know just
Freed.
actually, being privy to content in the content in the past that they are not.
Dare to say Jesus is a man.
That's all I got to say about that. I'm not calling no names.
All I've got to say about that is ethical philosophy exists, and it's far more accountable than religious deontology.
On that note, that part, right? Mic drop. We can end the show now. Well, I see. No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, I mean, but like, no, but seriously, like, when it comes to like, and even like when I was even thinking about that conversation I was having with the person concerning sexual partners and what is appropriate for, women versus what's appropriate for men. I mean, we weren't not discussing, trans people or even non-binary people, but we're just talking about just like the nature of how we look at gender or macroly in the United States, right? And how we assign certain roles to. If you are a woman, you're this, and if you're a man, you are that, right? And even kind of goes back to Aicila's a notion. Oh no, I think that Mateo, you brought this up about how, no, it wasn't. It was Cindy. Cindy, you brought this up about how this whole thing about the man makes the gun makes the man type narrative is very much so.
Toxic masculinity is a major part of the problem.
It is, and I would even say that it even goes beyond that, because like I personally don't like to use the word toxic masculinity, because masculinity in itself is not toxic. It's just the way that it's actually being put out there.
That is a right-wing talking point.
Well, I mean,
toxic masculinity refers to the parts of masculinity that are toxic.
Well, no, I get that. I get that. I just don't particularly like putting it together in that particular aspect, because it's to say that any person who is maybe like a cisgender man identifying that if you have masculinity, you're inherently toxic, and that's not true. But regardless of that, but as far as like the aspects that actually come with that particular point, I don't have like any type of pushback for. I just don't particularly care for the term. Just put it that way. And I'm pretty sure that's semantics. Regardless of that, we still have a very big portion of our culture in the American culture where there are a lot of different rules and assignments to whether if you are a woman versus whether if you are a man, and how those things actually show up in different spaces. I mean, just even think about like these past shooters that have happened since Buffalo. They all been men, all of them. You haven't had not one shooter that I can think of specifically, in a mass shooter that has come up that has been like assigned to like a woman identifying person.
In the literal hundreds and hundreds and hundreds that we've had in the last decades, a few have been not met, right? But literally, like you count on one hand or less, right?
Yeah, exactly. So going back to what Cindy was talking about when we're talking about rational thinking and critical thinking and versus not having this particular narrative, or even addressing it in the sense of where are we getting these ideas from, where are we getting these virtues from, why is it considered that if you are owning a gun that this is a way to define you and your masculinity. So I'm throwing that out there. I want you guys to chime in on that.
I mean, we've got gun industry advertisements that specifically say shit like, you'll get your man card back. So it's being literally sold that way.
Well, I mean, I can see how that can correlate, yes. But you also still, with, I don't know if it's necessarily NRA, but certain gun companies that also offer that same kind of conditioning for women. Like, in a sense, empowering women to say, take care of your own, and this is how you take care of your family, because you got to keep the woman in the prospects or the framework of the home caregiver perspective. And it's like, ladies, this is one of the ways that you can protect yourself. You can have a little gun holster in your bra or wherever you hold it. And this is not me knocking down the idea of gun owners or people that abide by open carry or carry firearms with them. I don't see that as a frightening aspect. I don't negate people for wanting to own guns as a collection of sorts or hunting, even though I'm not all in favor of that. I don't want a gun. I'm a person that's just like, it's not for me. It's not for me, dog. But, you know,
That's
obviously, and that's fine. But obviously, with everything that we're talking about, all the culture aspects, how you know, how America was started in general, you know, we came from transitioning ourselves from the European side over to this side, wanting to striving for our own freedoms, not being under a monarchy, not being under a kingship or anything like that. We're wanting to be our own, and all that mix, you know, separating each of ourselves from by various states, and obviously that has its impacts. So cultures, ideas, policies around all that has changed to where it has made it incredibly difficult to, and you know, yes, there's some religious aspects to it too. I mean, we're not the Moonies, for instance. We've talked about that on the nonprofits, and that has been discussed with, you know, certain sects of Christianity that tout harming themselves for the Lord. You know, that's and they steal scripture
Which
from
is
that.
crazy. Why? And Christians, Antangelo.
God need a gun.
Let me question. I got a question for the Christians in the room. If God is an all-powerful God, he's supposed to be omniscient, right? Omnipotent, and also omnipresent. That this is what God is supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Why would any Christian feel the need to arm themselves for the Lord if God is powerful enough to fight all thine battles? I believe that was in somewhere in the scriptures.
Y'all not praying hard enough.
I guess
Stop
your faith, your faith ain't lying.
Do not expect the Christian right to actually read the Bible. You're asking for too much.
Oh damn! Is that what
My
it
bad.
is? Okay, I'm asking a lot.
But can I dial back a little bit? Well, not dial back. Mateo,
go
because I know you had reference and response to our friend of the show, Pat Lowinger, in regards to him and Oz being individuals that do carry their firearms in public all the time. And you made a comment,
Yeah,
not
that
to
scares me.
necessarily put you on the spot, but I am putting you on the spot. Why? And I can understand why it would frighten you. I
Yeah, it's
completely
totally
understand
scary
that.
for me.
Yeah, but
that.
knowing them as well, if you know them as individuals, why would that frighten you? And like, go into that for us.
Oh, because if you see somebody with carrying a gun everywhere, first of all, what kind of opinion does this person have about everybody around them that they feel that they need to have a gun? And second, I already read that this person said that he's an expert on fire guns, but it comes to my mind those people who are not experts, who just want to show off, and they bring their guns, they carry them around, and any criminal just take it, shoot them, and they get a free gun. So for many reasons, seeing a person with a gun outside, you know, just carrying it for any reason, for me, it's scary as hell. I mean, even I can understand policemen, it's their job, and in theory, if they make a mistake, they are
No,
going to go through a
I
whole
even push
process.
back on that, because even me seeing a policeman openly carrying a gun is scary for me.
Yeah, it's scary.
I
But
mean,
you know that
I'm
there is
more
a
scared because I'm black. But
that too. That's an extra layer.
That's where the scariness comes from me. I mean, like
in general,
I would say, like, for me specifically, I've been around people who were police officers, you know, that were adjacent to me that has guns. My grandfather owned a gun. My dad never did, but he used to use guns in the military when he was a Navy person.
Mm-hmm.
If I know the person well, and if they have a firearm, if I know them well, I'm not scared. If I don't know you, I am concerned. So I can share your sentiments, Teo, when it comes to that. I personally am not a fan of guns, but I'm not opposed to a person who wants to own one. If you know, as far as, like, as long as it's done in a proper manner, if they go through the proper checks, and also I don't necessarily think that any person who's a citizen, resident, or regardless, needs to own a military style weapon. That makes no sense to me. Even like when I was looking at the news, and they were having this whole debate. Matter of fact, Congress passed a law with a bunch of different caveats concerning gun control. I haven't read it just yet, but a lot of people were saying it's more like a symbolism thing than in actual any actual action item rather. But and it still has to go to to Senate to be debated upon. So that's going to be the rub. But
Also,
but what I'm just saying, like, and I'm sorry, I just want to finish this, like, but even in that particular aspect, like, I've heard Congress people who actually support people still being able to purchase and own AR-15s say that they use AR-15s in the hunting aspect so that they can kill wild pigs and kill deer and kill
Raccoons.
raccoon, yes, yes,
raccoons.
the damn raccoons. Well, they rifle through my garbage. Sometimes I want to shoot their asses myself. But
Oh, come on.
do I really need an AR-15 to do that?
No, I'd suggest a Nerf gun for that. That'll solve your problem in
Ah,
a much
Guys,
more
I love raccoons. Please don't shoot raccoons. Also, two things that I
Well,
wanted to say.
I think about it.
Something ironic about my fear to guns. My father is a big fan of westerns, and he gave me some of that. We could watch some movies together, and they are cool. Guns are cool. I have participated in airsoft competitions, and I have an airsoft gun that it shoots, these small plastic bullets. And whenever I have it in my hand, it feels cool. But I see it as a toy. When I see somebody with a real gun able to kill me, that's why it scares me. And also what Cynthia mentioned, the type of guns that you have, guys, because I've seen videos on YouTube of guys showing, oh yeah, I bought this to hunt, and they go and proceed to cut a tree with a gun. Cutting a fucking tree with that type of gun.
I mean,
You don't
there
need
is
that
a
to hunt.
and there is a level of
all right, I need to get back in here because it's been a while, and
Right.
I am planning on applying for a concealed carry permit
Okay.
and carrying every day.
Mhm.
And real easy explanation
But
as a
are
trans
you
person.
really going to carry? I mean, but then
Oh, yeah.
let's wait, hold
100%,
on.
yes.
No. I'm not saying. I mean, obviously you're going to carry, but what I'm saying, are you planning on purchasing an AR-15?
No, because AR-15s are not really that effective of a firearm. Ultimately, the 223 that they fire is a 50 grain bullet. You can fire something 5 times that size out of a pistol. They're not very dangerous, and the police in Uvalde who saw one and turned tail, even though they had dozens and dozens of guys with pistols, were absolute cowards.
Well,
That's
yeah.
another
Well, I
topic.
will agree with about like them being absolute cowards. I don't know about it being not that dangerous. I mean, obviously that is I would call it a weapon of mass destruction. Obviously, it has done destruction and harm.
It is dangerous, but literally that round was chosen because the Pentagon Bean Counters said this is much cheaper than full-size, full-powered rifle cartridges, and we just changed back to full-size, full-powered rifle cartridges this year. It's iconic to American culture. It is the most popular, semi-automatic rifle. That's why it's in all these shootings, not because it's a particularly good or effective gun. Anyway, I absolutely intend to carry on a daily basis because I've been out as a non-binary trans person for a bit more than 5 years, and I have been assaulted sexually and violently quite a few times in that time frame. So there are reasons in the United States to carry.
No, I get that. I mean, like, shit. Like, I case manage trans people, especially trans women and Black trans women, and the murder rate against Black trans women is abhorrent. So actually wanting to protect yourself in the day to day,
and other trans people, because hell, Pulse happened.
Yeah, exactly. Pulse did happen.
There are people threatening mass shootings against queer people explicitly.
Sure.
And it is a popular right-wing talking point, but it does actually occasionally happen that a good person with a firearm can stop a bad person with a firearm.
Occasionally. It's a lot of caveats as far as this conversation is going, but we are winding down
We have
And I
questions.
did want to get to the starred questions before we go. So if we can go ahead and go to that. Please and thank you to our producers. I would love that. I think that like a couple of them we actually went over, but I think that some people came in late, so let's go ahead and go through all of them. Let's start with Philip Grant's question first. If you want to go ahead and have that. So, what about thorough background checks and certificates of character from law enforcement? So, who wants to take that?
Certificates of character. Oh, go ahead, Demi. I'm just
Yeah, go ahead, Demi.
reading out
Yeah,
loud.
as previous, I responded to this earlier, and I don't trust American law enforcement to be deciding who gets to own guns and not. Straight up, brown people are not going to get these certificates of character issued by a lot of police departments. We can expect that result. As far as making more thorough background checks, yes. And Bo of the Fifth Column has a few suggestions on how we actually apply good gun control. 54% of our mass shooters have a record of domestic violence, and a significant proportion of the ones that don't have that have a record of animal abuse. And those are easy things that I think most people can agree on, and that will possibly have the political will to actually get enacted. We're also talking about raising the age, because we have a serious problem with disgruntled high schoolers specifically shooting up their schools, and that's an easy one to solve. It's difficult for people to say, well, the Second Amendment means you need to be able to own a firearm before you're allowed to own a handle of vodka. That one's ridiculous. I think we might actually see that get passed. But there's also, again, there's loopholes in the existing background check system that are allowing people with domestic violence convictions to get firearms anyway. And we could be closing those and working on that.
Yeah, I know, Cindy, you had like some statistics specifically about domestic people who were involved with domestic violence and murders through domestic violence and still be able to purchase a gun.
Yeah, I talked about this on the Nonprofit, which you can watch tomorrow.
Yeah.
But yes,
Shameless plug. Yes.
it's a very good point made by Bo, and I think it's not only valid but also interesting in the way that it puts, as Demi said earlier, it puts those who will vote against in a very, very uncomfortable position. Because how can you justify to vote against preventing violent people, killers, to have guns? How can you justify this? Well, I mean,
I
lot.
will follow up. 54% of shooters have a history of domestic violence. 40% of cops, and the cop lobby will probably
Yes,
have a political impact on that. But it's going to look bad when they do. Not that they seem to care anymore.
Exactly. We know that many Republicans don't have any spine. They don't care anymore about what people think of them.
A lot of Democrats don't have spines either. Matter of fact, I think that I was listening to the Humanist Report, where he said that the GOP is a death cult and the Democrats are spineless. And I happen to agree. Because like we don't necessarily have like people, even if those are the ones who we elect, that seems like they have more of our sentiment, they still don't necessarily have the gravitas, in my opinion, in order for them to be able to push proper legislation, or even like back proper legislation in the way that they should, to prevent people from, I don't know, dying.
Yep.
Yeah, we're back on this tweet I mentioned earlier. It's when kids, when bullet holes in the face of third graders can't unite us. That's a very, very low place to be.
Yeah,
with the level of polarization we have in American politics, driven by years of propaganda funded by the same people who own the Republican and Democratic parties, yeah, we're genuinely possibly getting to a point where there is no compromise on anything ever.
Yeah.
Sure.
Damn it.
Our next question.
That's still there.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Isn't gun control, or excuse me, isn't gun culture in the U.S. supported by the Christian religious right part of their doctrine? I wouldn't necessarily say all of Christianity's doctrine. Obviously, like I had mentioned, there are certain sects like the
Christian
Moonies,
nationalists.
Christian nationalists that
Mhm.
abide by, carrying arms for Jesus, or bearing arms for the Lord, or things like that.
Which is crazy.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
insanity. But as far as Christianity as a whole, as far as any religion, period, as a whole, no, I don't agree.
Well,
But
I think
definitely, as far as gun culture within the U.S.,
yeah.
yes, obviously there is a gun culture in the U.S.
There's a strong correlation. There are peaceful and liberal and leftist groups of Christians in the United
Sure.
States.
Of course, no, I
Absolutely.
don't think it's fair for any person to say
Different.
that there is a monolith
Monolith.
when it comes to any person depending on their faith or their religion.
Agreed.
However, there is a sect, like I would say Christian nationalists specifically, who happens to also be LGBTQ. They happen to also be anti marginalized groups. They happen to be anti-Black. They happen to be anti Latine. They happen to be anti anybody not white. And they would still tout this whole notion of gun gods and babies. I like I said, that was literally the campaign slogan of Candace Taylor, who was who, even though she did not win her primary, her counterparts absolutely did share her sentiments. So we do have that particular issue where this sect of people who call themselves Christian, who are Christian nationalists, who are MAGA people per se, are very much so in this particular culture when it comes to making sure that they be able to own guns. Can we go to our next question? Okay, so does everyone in Sweden own a gun but are taught how to use them responsibly? So I watched a daily show, episode, let's put it that way, episode where one of the reporters actually went to Sweden to talk to different gun owners in Sweden. And it's kind of interesting, y'all. I don't know if you all knew that they're just as crazy about guns as they
Absolutely.
are here.
Yep.
But they have very strong gun control laws at their federal level when it comes to how who can purchase a gun. Every gun in their country is registered with their local and federal authorities.
Yes.
There is an age that you happen to, in order for you to be able to meet, and I believe it's like 21 and older. And you also, there's also like even like regulated laws on being able to have like bullets within your guns versus on your versus not, if you're going to carry out in public. So they have like a lot of different laws at their level in order for them to actually regulate it. But they also, before Demi, you jump in, I just got to get this point out. They also have a 0.002% murder rate in their country.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Demi.
So part of the reason why Sweden doesn't have a lot of gun violence is it's a much more peaceful country with less inequality, and
that too.
People aren't in the savage poverty that we have in many areas of the United States, rural and urban. But also, you are not allowed to have it. Every like adult of a certain age is given a rifle, but you aren't given the ammunition. The ammunition is held centrally in town. And if you want to practice with the rifle, you go to a government gun range, one of which fires over a highway, which is wild. They've got it ballistically set up so that the targets up on the mountain are high enough up that you cannot miss and hit the highway, and it's fine. It's very strictly controlled. They don't have a legal right to have whatever guns they want. They can purchase hunting firearms, but you can't kill 60 people with a knife in seconds.
Somebody started
really
the knife
good at
argument.
Throwing knives.
Right, yeah. like it.
But it's not one knife. You need the
Shuriken.
60 knives.
Yeah.
Oh, can
Go for
I quote somebody? Because somebody's saying that if you look at worldwide statistics, you will realize that this is going to be an issue unique to North America. Because as you have been mentioning, in Sweden, they have all their guns and they love them. But as Demi is explaining, they regulate it. They have specific ways how to use it. And they are not carrying guns loaded everywhere, as
Right.
some people were saying.
Which, of course,
that's a
right.
big thing.
That's our overall point. That yes, we agree that, you know, obviously mirroring Sweden, we just have that, you know, culture of gun ownership mirrored to them. But obviously, the differences in our culture is because of lobbying, because of big money, because of whatever, name your poison.
Yeah.
We're having issues much
And
more
you hit
dramatically than anywhere else.
You hit an important point. Culture. Gun culture over there and responsible ownerships. That's the key. And as I always mention, the education is the key for all of this. There is a strong education over there. People understand how dangerous guns are. They understand how they work and why they have to have all these.
And the education actually starts with their children.
Right.
Yeah, as well.
Yeah, and there's
sorry, but in the USA, last thing, in the USA, you cannot have guns in the cartoons, but you turn on the news and you see all these shootings happen all the time. So that's extremely silly, I have to say.
Yeah. Okay, Sarah.
Sorry, Cynthia.
That's okay.
I was just going to say that the big difference in culture from countries that don't have mass shootings in the US is that part of the teaching of the use of weapon is also to respect it and respect its power, which is not the case in the US. I served in the French army for 20 years, so I learned to use guns and rifles. And the first things I learned was safety, was never point the gun towards someone you don't want to shoot. It's be careful, it's dangerous. And that's extremely strong in the first weeks. And you don't have that in the US. And that could help a lot. If you add to the background checks some practice and some teaching that include this respect, that would improve things.
Yeah.
We have that in, for example, Illinois. You aren't allowed to open carry firearms. If you don't have a concealed carry permit, it has to be unloaded and disassembled if you're going to bring it anywhere. And if you want to get a concealed carry permit, you have to go through a series of government-mandated training courses. But yeah, that doesn't necessarily change the culture where here in the United States on television, you can watch someone commit a murder with a gun, and you cannot watch, gosh forbid, someone's boobs. The culture is deeply violent and it has problems.
And remember also too, that's here in Illinois, right? But that's not necessarily, you know, gun control laws that are shared, you know, from neighboring states. All right, let's go to our next question from Ozzy Oz, or like I like to call him, Jena's boo. No, the one before that. Yeah, there we go. Okay, can we discuss the main problem? It may have been brought up before I just got here, and that is mental health diagnosis and treatment. Yeah, let's talk about that. So I think that I don't know, it was either Demi or Cindy that brought up the statistics when it came to people who happen to been part of domestic violence, and also violence against, like, you know, animals and things of that nature, and still be able to purchase a gun. So I believe it goes back to, again, the whole looking at a person's history when it comes to, like, you know, their mental stability, their behavioral health history, and not necessarily keeping that into account when it comes to them being able to purchase a gun. We don't necessarily have like a universal, remember like this whole thing about universal background checks, like that's not a thing here in the United States, right? You have like, you know, some states who have like a stronger regulation on background checks versus others. You know, like we talked about Texas being loosey-goosey, Illinois being Indiana is loosey-goosey, when Wisconsin is loosey-goosey, right? And in Illinois specifically, those where the majority of the guns come from. So if they may not necessarily pass like a background check here in Illinois, but they can go to a neighboring state, even if they happen to have like documented mental issues, and still be able to purchase a gun as long as they meet the minimal criteria. You know, now one of the things that even like Cindy brought up about like how are we teaching our children when it comes to rational thinking, when it comes to critical thinking. And I would even and even like I brought this up like with my previous therapist, like, and we even talked about this on the nonprofits, like how many schools, and I can tell you it's not many, that teach SEL. What is SEL? That is social emotional learning. This is not something that is, matter of fact, you have states now that actually ban it. Florida. What do I call Florida, Mateo?
What the fuck, Florida?
Yes.
As usual.
Yes. You have to say it with emphasis, Mateo. It doesn't carry if you don't do it with emphasis.
Okay, let me try. What the fuck, Florida? Is that better?
Almost. You
Oh,
almost.
come on.
You know, this
One
is
day.
practice. Anyway, yeah. So like, so this is, and remember also too, like mental illness and behavioral health itself is still highly stigmatized in the United States. Highly stigmatized. We, if a lot of times, especially with our male identifying counterparts, with our men identifying counterparts, if you are even talking about possibly seeing a therapist, you are thought of as weak.
Yep, totally.
In addition to the background check half of things, the other thing that unites most of these mass shootings is that these are suicidal people who do not expect to survive what they're doing.
That's true.
And there's so many different ways beyond background checks where our mental health system is failing. As you're saying, it's seen as weakness to see a therapist. The fact that we are just broadly not teaching kids in school about mental health and happiness and relationships and all sorts of important strategies for negotiating life and having emotional maturity, those are definitely part of the mental health problem here that don't strictly have anything to do with guns. Guns are creating a problem out of those existing problems we could be solving.
Yeah.
But you know,
go ahead.
There is an issue about because when Oz mentions public health, well, down here, if you need a gun, you have to go through a specific, through a lot of tests, and one of them is checking your mental health. So if you have a problem, you are sent to therapy and stuff like that. So it's all part of, you know, regulating how people has access to the guns instead of just letting anyone getting guns as many as they want.
But I will say, and we're speaking about criteria, and we can shuffle through the other questions, but when we're trying to determine a criteria of universal background checks or universal checks in general, where is the extent? Like, oh, if we recognize someone with a mental health disorders, issues, it's a wide range.
Sure.
Where do we draw the line? Oh, someone who's bipolar, no, they can't own a gun. Someone who has major depressive issues, no, they can't own a gun. You're basing, what would that base criteria be? You can't just, everyone has some sort of mental health aspect that you can't necessarily tailor a judge to one particular category, because there are frequencies to that too, right? So if you're going to just outright say, oh, if you have a mental health problem, that shouldn't be a person to not own a gun, period. So you have to justify and kind of create
it's not how it works. Let me finish this.
Okay,
go
ahead.
You have a specific problem, you need therapy. It's not that, oh, you are a suicide, you cannot have a gun because you're going to kill yourself. I mean, that's part of the reasons why they send you to therapy, and you have to deal with this and you have to treat this. Of course, after that, you can have a gun if you're not going to kill yourself. But if they realize that you have a severe depression, and as soon as you get your gun, you're going to shoot yourself, obviously you shouldn't have access to the gun right now. You need to go with the professionals, and the professionals are the ones who are going to study your case, are going to go with you through all the steps, and then when you don't want to kill yourself, you can go and get a gun.
But how do you determine a person doesn't want to kill themselves?
I will say this. I will say this. So I know, and I know this is not something that's generally practiced at every place that's like, that does primary care. But I know for our patients, before they happen to even see their GP or PCP, we call them PCPs here in the United States. That's primary care physician versus general practitioner. That they go through a questionnaire of to see like of your mental health wellness, and if there's anything that happens to spike based on their own questions, then that's something that the GP brings up so that they can go ahead to address. Now, and I would even think of there are, depending on like your line of work that you happen to go in here in the United States, you go through mental health evaluations all the time. So I think that I don't necessarily know like the whole like answer to like where is the line. But we have established here in the United States some type of criteria that we can start to build upon to really, have a proper evaluation of people, behavioral health and mental health stability, in order to see if they would be, if it would make sense for them to be able to purchase a gun in the first place. I mean, like, we do it with other jobs. Why can't we do it here?
In any case, no one expects the law to be perfect at the first time.
Sure.
That's how it works. We have trial and error. If we see that the threshold is too low or too high, then we change it. But at least we put something in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
I will step in on what Teo was talking about earlier. One problem with applying that standard is here in the United States, especially where we have a lot of issues with bias, the professionals making the mental health assessments are probably going to make more negative assessments of people who are
sure
in a marginalized group.
Sure.
It's almost like the USA has many problems and not only one problem.
And I mean, like, that's real. Like, if we even like happen to do like ways for them to go to evaluations versus like, white folk versus like, maybe like a black person, and like them being like mentally to be tried mentally fit in order for them to own a gun. We do have, unfortunately, we still have a big issue with, confirmation bias in the United States, complicit bias in the United States. I mean, if we think about like the issues concerning, even like hiring, healthcare, and all these other things, there's going to be like a huge difference of experience when it comes to a person who happens to be white versus not. Right, that's already been confirmed. But I know that we have to wrap up soon, so I'm just going to go straight to Dean Kruger's question. A quick glance at the worldwide statistics left me scratching my head. Can we at least concede that this is an issue unique to North America?
Yes.
I agree with Dean.
Yes. I am perhaps the most contrary person here. Yes, absolutely. But like, that's the result of 300 years of gun culture in the United States. 400 million guns. We have more guns than people. Like, and that isn't a situation that you can turn around on a dime. But there are still things that we could be doing, and gosh, I hope we do at least some of them to curb this problem.
I agree. I agree.
I just wanted to answer to Aaron Coalson's last comment. He said, to me, individual gun ownership is an antiquated idea on par with misogyny and racism. It's an outdated concept. And I totally agree with this. And that's the idea I wanted to finish with, is that in a civilized society, nobody needs to have guns except the police and maybe the army. But what I in an egalitarian civilized society, you don't need a gun. I never felt, whether in France or here in Belgium, I never felt the need to ever have a gun. It never occurred to me that, hey, if I had a gun right now, I would feel better. Never happened to me. That's an idea from the past. It's the cowboy mentality.
As people are mentioning in chat, expecting the police to defend you in any way when they have no legal obligation to continue to prove that they are not interested in doing so, and continue to take far longer than is safe for you in a violent altercation. I'm glad you haven't had any of those experiences as a trans person over there in Belgium and France, but I have been in some of those situations where a gun
No. That's why I said. That's why I said an egalitarian, civilized society. That doesn't include the U.S. That doesn't include the U.S.
The United States is not an egalitarian society. I think that we can all.
An antiquated idea on par with misogyny and racism. Well, we're not over those yet. We haven't fixed those problems yet.
I totally agree.
And I think arming minorities is a helpful solution on both of those problems.
No, I totally agree. I was talking in the best case scenario. Of course, what I said doesn't apply to the US because the US is not there yet.
No.
And that's the point I made yesterday on my video, is that on many topics, the US is not considered civilized.
I consider my third world country more advanced than the USA. Sorry, guys, you do have the money and Hollywood movies, but
that's fine. U.S. leftists have been saying that many parts of Central America are objectively better healthcare, better many things. I'm sorry, I have to get in here. I live in an area where people hunt their food with AR-15s. No, because that's ridiculous. Why would you want a giant hole in your feet? An AR-15, a 223 round, is actually not sufficient for killing a deer in a way that prevents the meat from spoiling. It's actually too small. So that's ridiculous. The idea that this AR-15s blow holes in things is
Demi, just to talk in
gun
the name
control
of
nonsense.
Well, but
Demi, probably she's not an expert.
Demi,
on guns. We are not experts.
Yeah, I mean, but and I would also say too, like, we already seen, like, in the case of Vivaldi with the particular AR-15 that particular person had, that their children were unrecognizable to the point where they had to actually identify them with DNA samples. So this is definitely something that has to be addressed in a more holistic manner. I mean, like, none of us are experts, right? But we just all have our opinions, but we really, really strongly believe in our opinions. But, but regardless, I think that having that conversation, especially at the federal level, of making, laws that make sense to regulate a very huge problem is appropriate. But guys, we are well over the hour and 30-minute mark. And I know that, like, a lot of us have, other things that they have to do. And yes, again, Granny, I agree with you. They blew the heads off of children. Yes, they did. And that's why we are here. But we're going to go ahead and wrap up. I just want to give everyone a chance to shill, just tell people, like, who you are and where they can find you. And then we're going to go ahead and close it on out. Let's go ahead and start with you, Teo.
Sorry. I would like to. Was it Johnny who said that in developed countries there are no gun shootings? Yeah. Sorry, guys. The best country in the world is not the best country anymore. And I used to be a big fan of the USA, and now I couldn't live there even if I got paid. The Latino guy walking around with people who are carrying guns whenever they go. Imagine a racist looking at me and I just go and say something that sounds anti-American. Nope, your country scares me. Your people scare me. And if you feel that you want to bring, I understand.
I entirely agree with you.
I'm sorry.
I have no complaints with what you're saying.
Good.
Right.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Finish on out, Mateo. Like, final thoughts and shill. That's what I was saying. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, thanks for inviting me. Love you all, and it was fun being here. It was quite interesting. So I hope my point of view wasn't too extremist and too far from you people. But once again, some of your ideas scare me, and I'm not afraid to say that.
All right. And where can people find you?
Please check my channel, Nuestra Experiencia Tea. I have been speaking a little bit in the chat. Sadly, this is only for people who speak Spanish, but hey, maybe if you want to practice your Spanish, so go and check me there. That's it. Thank you
I've
in
been
advance.
wanting to practice, Teo, so we need to get on that.
Oh yeah, totally. Estás invitada.
See. Demi?
Yeah, that's about as much Spanish as I speak also, so maybe I will practice also. Don't find me.
Never.
And I think I've talked most of my thoughts over pretty thoroughly here already. Anybody else?
Oh wait, did he say don't find me? I thought he
Yeah.
said don't fight me.
They
I
know.
would never fight you. Find you,
Yeah,
I
she
will
said,
search
don't
it.
Yeah,
find
Both.
yeah,
me.
bad idea.
Don't
I will
fight
track you,
or
Demi.
find Demi. Gotcha. But thank you again for being here, Demi, and actually adding to the discourse. We do appreciate you being here.
Yes.
Thank you for tolerating my deeply left radical thoughts.
I mean, hey, my boyfriend tells me that I'm his favorite communist. Cindy?
Yeah, it was very fun being here. These discussions need to happen, and I'm glad we do them on this channel that we are trying to grow and make better. So everyone, thanks for being here. You can find me on my own channel, The Path to Reason. You can also find me here sometimes, and also tomorrow on the Nonprofits.
Very
Indeed.
nice.
Very nice. And Jena.
Yes, and I'll steal Farron's words. Great spirited discussion. I do agree. Spirited. We all have our varying ideas, opinions, and views, and we should. We definitely should. We all come from very different parts in the world. So, I mean, I would find this conversation highly boring if we all agreed with each other point blank. But that would be my own 2 cents in that. But of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Jena_BFA. Obviously, I'm sometimes here too, so I'm kind of giving myself back into the mix amongst other busy things, primarily from the Atheist Network group, also lovingly known as Tang. If you haven't already bought reservations for the Better conference, because Cynthia has, and Cynthia's going to be a speaker. If you want to see Cynthia talk her shit, you got to go and see Cynthia talk her shit. The same. Buying her a drink. And so, of course, Better Conference due 25th, 26th. So go and buy your reservations there if you're going to attend. Other than that, you can find me on Tang. You can find me on here. You can follow me on Twitter.
Thank you. Guys, thank you all for, again, just being here and just like just sharing your thoughts. I would just say this. I talked about this before, but I feel the need to repeat that I have a 12-month-old child. I did not give birth to this child. This was my niece's child, and she passed away back in December in a car accident, and so I was asked to take over the care of this child. So he is essentially my son. And when I look at the statistics of mass shootings, especially when it comes to kids in school, it's staggering. We had but not only in mass shootings in school, we had them at a Walmart because a person decided that they were disgruntled against Latina people and decided to shoot them up. We had them at a Tops grocery store in Buffalo, New York, rather, because a white young man decided that he was disgruntled against immigrants, Jews, and Black people, and decided to go to a predominantly Black area to shoot them and kill them, and said on his AR-15, "Here are your reparations." And then we had a young man in Uvalde, Texas, who decided to go to his alma mater and kill children and teachers because he was bullied. And we've had at least 30 mass shootings since those particular ones have taken place. It's not okay that we're almost at 300 mass shootings in 2020 in the United States alone. And this is not something that happens in other developed countries. And as Teo even talked about, even in what is considered a third world country. We have to do something. And I believe that our neighbors in the earth have shown us ways that we can go here in the United States in order for us to slow down exponentially mass shootings that happen to our neighbors and to our children. And even though that our issues in the United States are very complex, especially when you think about racism, when you think about issues against the LGBTQ community, when you think about issues when it comes to marginalized communities and the like, yes, we do have a huge problem, and a lot of it is based on a 6,000-year-old book that never changes and should only be something that keeps your table from wobbling at night. I said this on, and I'm saying this on the nonprofits tomorrow, and I'm saying this again to you. If you are a person who votes and you believe in actually having a better society to live in, your voice is necessary. A lot of us here in the United States get a bit apathetic when it comes to our elected officials because we feel like that we have no voice and that we can't do anything about what happens at the federal level or even the state level. You all put these people in office. You are their bosses. So if you believe that we need to have better gun control, if you believe that we need to have better laws, period, so that we can live in a just and equitable society, then you need to tell your elected officials so. On that note, if you want to check me out, I am at Twitter at Cam Glamming. I also have a blog called freedmenhealthandwellness.com where I talk about the social determinants of Black Americans that descend from chattel slavery. So the social determinants health, rather, that of Black people who descend from chattel slavery here in America. I also am going to be at the Better Conference in 2 weeks. That is hosted by Aziaz and the Tang Gang. So please, I mean, there's going to be a lot of great speakers there. So please check us out there. I have like a list of different, conferences that I will be at this year, and also check out. And so, but it's on my Twitter, so please check this out, and on my Linktree. All those descriptions are in the lower third below, and also I am at a loss for words right now, so I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you again, everybody. Jena, Cindy, Teo, Demi, even Aicila. Thank you guys for joining us for this conversation. Thank you to our producers, Wes and Courageous, that's in the background, helping us, pull the knobs and point the switches. We appreciate you and all of your hard work. Make sure you guys like this video, subscribe to our channel, Skeptic Haven. Make sure you also hit the bell so that every time that Skeptic Haven goes live, that you get a chance to actually view all the content that comes from this particular network. There's a lot of content, debates, also conversations about the Bible, science conversations, and also Women Atheists Unload that happens every Saturday. And on that note, thank you guys for tuning in, and you have a good rest of your Saturday.
But if I lay down and I play dead and I stay dead, maybe you'll get sick of being the monster out of my head, under my bed. Think you're something out of my nightmares. See me right there. But if I lay down and I play dead and I stay dead, then will you get bored of killing me?
Silhouettes of you are like a taunt. Never really know just what you want. With you I don't ever feel calm. I can feel the sweat inside my palms. Play with me like cats and a string. You don't understand the pain it brings. You don't ever wanna give me wings. You don't ever wanna set me free. You know I'm addicted to you, and it's twisted, you've been gifted with the evil voodoo. Got me coming back for more, even when I've been screwed. Dolls full of pins, pierce my heart straight through. I got issues